We are back inside City Hall. The job of my first guest tonight is to carry out Mayor de Blasio's plan for improving public housing in our city. Her to-do list is growing very quickly, whether it's dealing with the issues left behind by the Bloomberg administration or hearing complaints from residents or taking on ambitious new initiatives. Joining us to talk about how she plans to tackle all of this and much more, we've got the Chair and Chief Executive Officer of the New York City Housing Authority, Shola Olatoye. Thank you for coming in. Welcome to the program.
Thank you so much for inviting me. I'm so happy to be here.
I want to start with safety, since this has been one of the big issues. The Daily News just reported that there was $27 million for cameras and that it has stalled out because the plans haven't been forwarded to the city controller. I wanted to get an update on that because my understanding is you're going to try to expedite things and get it all done.
Yeah, well, so first of all, you know, everyone deserves to feel safe in their home, Earl, and what's so wonderful about this administration is that the mayor has charged all of us to work and operate differently. So we are all coming together in what is a very complicated process with our residents to ensure that those resources get spent on not just cameras, but comprehensive security systems, and that those enhancements are done by the end of the year.
Mm-hmm. Okay, and the specifics in that was that to get it done, you've got to get a contracting process moved forward, and that a key point has been reached.
Yeah, and we've thankfully with our partners had already been doing that work, and that process was already underway. And again, I think here we have an opportunity to work differently and to have the Comptroller's office, the OMB around the table to help us move and to help us move faster.
We had a report on this, and I see some of this. I know people here and there go through Gowanus sometimes and some other projects, and a lot of the times the doors are propped open, and that's for air circulation, that's for convenience. In some cases, it's for sort of bad reasons, but it does frustrate security. At some point, you've got to get the tenants involved in this if it's going to really work.
I couldn't agree with you more, and frankly, as someone who has done more than 40 tours and developments, and I do a series of unannounced visits as well, where I actually have gone and closed those propped up doors. Our residents are critical to ensuring that that our residents remain safe. And so that's why it's so important that for us to acknowledge here that we have an opportunity with the mayor's investment in NYCHA, that it's not just cameras. Cameras are really one component of a larger security system that allows us to connect into the NYPD, that allows us to work with our local law enforcement professionals and the residents to ensure that those cameras are placed in the most advantageous locations.
Last question on this topic. There was, in one of the articles, it said that there was some dispute or some question in one particular development about who was supposed to be on the other side of those cameras, whether it should be NYCHA employees or NYPD. I was wondering, why would it ever be anybody except the cops?
I think that particular instance, the issue here is, we want to make sure that any systems that we are installing are compatible with what NYPD was working, and so that issue was resolved very quickly, and so that what you will have there is a comprehensive and connected system.
I understand you've got some new initiatives and that NYCHA is going to be doing something different as far as how it relates to the communities around some of the developments. What's that about?
Yes, well, so, we took the mayor's mandate of resetting relationships very seriously, and we are in the process of developing a real plan for the future or the next generation of public housing. And so that means we are engaging with our stakeholders in different ways. As I said, visiting developments, sitting down with people across the table from one another to really think about how we will look, operate, and be financed for the next generation, because the model that we all know is not sustainable. We have to think about how we operate differently, and then we have to do that in concert, thinking about those things in concert with our residents, with our stakeholders. So this is a process that is much bigger than one particular component, but truly thinking about what does NYCHA look like in the 21st century? How do we ensure that it's around for another 80 years?
What's your sense of it? I mean, you're going to be one of many stakeholders in that discussion, but you're certainly first among equals. I mean, what's your? I mean, let me throw out an issue that I know has come up from time to time. I'm sure you've thought about this, which is that maybe NYCHA needs to go to its core competency, make sure the buildings and the elevators are running smoothly, get out of the social service business, stop trying to run community centers and a bunch of other social service programs.
Well, in fact, you know, I think that one of the things that I've been talking about so almost like, you know, sort of consistently is we have to focus on our core business, and that is as a landlord. You know, we are the city's largest private landlord, and in addition to resetting those relationships, people have to have faith that when they call our customer center, call center, or when there is a problem with their apartment, that the landlord's going to show up in a reasonable amount of time and fix that. That's what they are paying for. That's what our responsibility is. And so, full stop. Now, I think, you know, the second part of our mission, Errol, is the facilitation to social services. And so what I'm so excited about as part of Next Generation NYCHA is to think about a new model for social service delivery, one that truly delivers best-in-class services to seniors, to families, and that's a process, again, I think it's another example of the way in which we're working differently while we're bringing people around the table to have that conversation.
Well, you are a housing person. You've done a lot of this stuff. You know how a houser. You know how complex it can be, and you also know that when a project doesn't work in year 29 of a 30-year project, you stop it from going forward right from the beginning. Now, your predecessor says there's an accumulated capital deficit for NYCHA that could be as high as $14 billion. It seems hard to get past that, and people often do. They kind of move on to the next topic. And I always come back to, well, if you can't do that, this whole thing is going to fall apart literally at some point, right?
Well, and that's why I think what's Next Generation NYCHA is really about addressing the model that and how we are financed. You know, I don't need to tell you we've lost half of our funding since 2001, and our buildings are 60 years old on average. We have an aging population. All of the issues that you and your colleagues have documented. So, you know, this is not about tinkering around the edges. This is about a Marshall Plan, if you wouldn't say. If you would say, in terms of, you know, creating a capital infusion that allows us to deal with the $18 billion capital need.
Oh boy.
That we have in our that we have across our portfolio. And this, you know, that's real people's lives, right? You know, we have done a tremendous amount of work. We still have a lot of work to do to address the work orders, the time it takes for basic repairs. We've made, with the mayor's investment, we've brought that number down to on average about 7 days across the city. You'll always go to a development and find a different number, that's for sure. But a lot of activity and work has gone there, and NYCHA staff have worked tirelessly to bring that number down. But the challenge is they're working in 60 and 70-year-old buildings, and the money from Washington is just not there.
Well, but I mean, when I hear that the Lend-Lease program or the infill program, it went by a couple of different names, started by the previous administration. The idea was to take parts of your portfolio, lesser used ball fields, community centers, parking lots, and turn them into places that could maybe generate some income. Your colleague Alicia Glenn, the deputy mayor, said basically that was full stop. And I wasn't clear on whether it was a good idea that was executed poorly under the previous administration, or just a bad idea that you're not going to consider?
Well, so first of all, you know, we are, and if you've read the mayor's plan, NYCHA is a part of the mayor's housing plan, and we take that very seriously. I have said that, you know, every context of any conversation about potential development happens within the context of what that means for NYCHA today. And so the process of Next Generation NYCHA is not only thinking about how we operate differently, but how we look. And this is a real opportunity to re-knit NYCHA back into the neighborhoods and where we exist, and to think about the housing needs of our population. A third of our residents are over the age of heads of household are over the age of 62. Those folks are aging in place. They're not going anywhere because they can't afford to go anywhere else. How do we, but as you all have well documented, we have issues, challenges with people who are doubled up in smaller apartments and folks who are in under-outcome. So it's a real challenge and a real set of trade-offs that, as the housing, these are the trade-offs that we have to make every day. So how do we take a limited amount of this finite resource and make it work for our residents. We have to think about development, but within the context of affordable housing, within the context of the mayor's larger goal of 200,000 units.
Some of that seems, I mean, frankly, from my point of view, almost insoluble. I mean, you've in your biography, I saw that your grandmother was in the Albany houses,
yes,
and you
right.
center sort of a gathering place for a lot of your family. Doesn't matter how empty that nest is, and I don't know how many units are in that apartment.
People always come back.
Right, they always come back, and trying to get somebody like that to move to a smaller apartment away from people that she knows and cares about, her longtime neighbors, away from the community that she's been a part of, is not just difficult, but in some ways almost cruel, right?
So this is where I think facts are such an important part here. The policy that we have is one that first encourages residents who are identified as being in an overoccupied apartment. First is to find a place for them within their community, because as you said, those social networks are oftentimes the one reason why people are still alive, and so we recognize that, and as does the policy. And if that space isn't available, then we look to be within the borough. But understanding that that's a very hard decision for anyone, particularly senior residents, to make. NYCHA has examples of doing this well. We created, in concert with intermediaries and nonprofit organizations, a senior housing development on what was NYCHA land, where there are now NYCHA residents from that development living there with on-site services, still connected to their social connections and community. So there's a model here, and I'd like to see us do that throughout our portfolio.
And I guess last but not least, there was a New York Post story about buildings, not NYCHA developments, but just individual parcels, 1 to 4 family homes in a state of extreme disrepair, causing blight, vermin problems, and all kinds of other problems. Why not just sell off those properties?
So this is one of those things I inherited when I took the job on March 5th. And, this is, I think, knowing this project, it is public policy, well-intended public policy gone wrong. The challenge here is we're trying to meet a number of different goals. One is affordable housing for folks, and 2 is our HUD mandate of trying to ensure that the housing authority is compensated appropriately. Clearly, the state of those properties is unacceptable, and we're working really closely with our federal partners to ensure that we can dispose of them appropriately.
Okay, we'll keep an eye on that and much, much more. And at some point in the future, when we have more time, we should talk about what's going on in the Sandy recovery out in the Rockaways and some other places. But for now, we're going to have to say goodnight. Thank you so much for coming by.
Thank
Very nice
you
to meet
so much for the invitation.
Okay, we're going to take a short break now, and when we come back, after losing to Congressman Charles Rangel in the Democratic primary, Adriano Espaillat faces another tough race. We're going to talk to the man who's looking to squash his state Senate re-election bid, namely former Councilman Robert Jackson. Also tonight, is there a chance that a deal to give the Democrats control of the state Senate could fall through? We'll talk it over with 4 top strategists in our Consultants Corner. Stay with us.